I'll bring this committee of the whole meeting to order Wednesday, January the 20th, and that to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of Stahelis. And the next order of business, please.
Yes, Your Worship. We have number 2, introduction of late items. Are there any late items?
Any late items? None?
No. Okay. Okay, Your Worship, then I'd like...
Excuse me.
Councillor Piper?
Well, Councillor Piper, yes.
I have some late items I'd like to add, please.
Yes, and they are?
I'd like to, and it may tie into the discussion with paid parking, but I'd like us to look at a strategic parking master plan is one item.
Right.
I'd also like to discuss bus shelters.
Okay.
I'd also like to discuss a cover for our rink.
For rink, right.
And I'd also like to discuss the possibility of some working or mayor type of committees.
Okay. Okay, agenda is amended.
Yes, just before we start, Your Worship, I want to draw Council's attention to item 4B, the last item on the recommendation, number 3. There is a portion of that recommendation is missing. After January 6, 2021, it should read for a term of 3 years with an option to extend for an additional 2 years. That's all I want to mention, Your Worship. So I'll call for approval of the agenda as amended then, please.
And moved by Councillor Hooper, seconded by Councillor Vidal. Call the question. All in favour? Thank you, Councillor. The next order of business, please.
Yes, thank you. We'll move on to number 4, items for discussion, and we have the financial officer presenting the 2021-2025 financial plan.
Ms. Jones. Sorry, before I put you on, Councillor Hooper.
Just one quick question. Is this being live streamed and recorded for the members of the public?
Yes, we're on Zoom now, yes. Carry on, Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're just setting up the budget to be shared on the draft budget presentation to be shared on the screen at the moment. Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the rest of Council. Today we're presenting a draft of the budget at the Committee of the Whole meeting, January 20th, 2021. The first items I'd like to bring Council's attention to are some general revenue highlights. So for 2021, the municipal tax requirement is currently in the draft budget at $2,425,128. The community will still receive the small communities grant, which is around $325,500, the gas tax grant of $117,000, and a small increase to the carrot grant at $3,000. That's the Climate Action Rebate Program grant. If Council has any questions as we go through the slides, it might be advantageous to ask them at the time.
So if I have any questions, just put your hand up, please.
Some general expense highlights. Included in this budget is an increase in wages, which are part of the 2% wage increase per the collective agreement and any wage increases approved by council. There are additional professional services for this year, the actuarial valuation of post-employment benefits at a cost of $5,250. This is every 3 years, we do a fulsome review of the actuarial valuation of this liability. There is included in here an exempt salary review amount of $10,000. IT support services will also increase, mainly due to some increase in our accounting software and the requirements now to do many of our meetings remotely, so additional Zoom software costs, virtual meeting support, the Bang the Table public consultation software, and general increase in IT support. Under protective services, in the fire department, there are increases to paid on-call firefighter rate by 2% per prior year council approvals. That approval ends in 2021 and council would have to do reconsideration should they wish to increase it after that time. In the fire department had an estimating operating surplus in 2020 of about $38,000. In this budget, we've included this to transfer to their capital reserve for fire equipment purchases in 2021, which council have already approved and will discuss later in the budget. Under development, general municipal engineering is included in the budget for $33,200. There is also a Mccoombs bridge assessment, which will be gas tax funded for about $30,000. This is a carry forward from projects in 2020 that had to be deferred due to the impacts of COVID. Under planning, there's the OCP review. Sorry, planning. $80,000 is our general planning services during the year. There's also an additional OCP review, which is gas tax funded for $50,000, also a carry forward project, and the urban forest master plan. Again, gas tax funded and a carry forward project in the amount of $75,000.
Excuse me, Tracy, Councillor Hooper.
Yes, I see up there we've got 30,000 for the Mccoombs bridge assessment. Didn't we have that done when we had the roads and bridges master plan? Pay for that already back in 2019?
Look.
The previous assessment was basically it just said to monitor. This will be a more in-depth review to see exactly what would be required to bring the bridge to current standards.
Carry on, Ms. James.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under community development, the Starlight Rink. In 2020, we saw that, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, the Starlight Rink was not able to open in the fall due to those restrictions. What we've included in the budget here, if expenses are not covered by revenue in 2021, though that lost revenue will be covered by the COVID Restart Grant. At this point, we are estimating approximately $8,000 in 2021. That may not be covered if the rink hasn't been able to open during the normal January, February, and this is an estimate at this time. Under public works, along with their normal workload, there are a couple additional repairs and maintenance items this year. They will be replacing the windows in the public works buildings. They will be replacing sheeting in the public workshop attic, which is an OH&S requirement. And this will be approximately $8,000 has been included in the budget for this, funded from the 2020 Public Works Maintenance surplus for items that they did not spend this year. In addition, street lighting, repairs and maintenance. There'll be a replacement of 2 street lights on Chehalis. Approximate cost is around the $11,000 mark. Electricity. In the budget this year, we've included increases to electrical costs throughout the budget due to increased consumption, and that's estimated at about $10,000. which will include consumption for lights on the lake, the skating rink concession area, and the lagoon fountain. COVID-19 Restart Grant. In 2020, the village received a COVID-19 Restart Grant, and a report was brought to council that identified some of the funding that was used in 2020 to offset the increased expenses due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to adjust this slide to reflect $219,000 and remove the reference to the OHS consultant. So what we've included in the budget is expected revenue loss from the Memorial Hall and special events rentals. At this time, the village is not renting out any of the facilities, and for the foreseeable future, we don't know when that will be able to start again. In addition, we expect loss of skating rink revenue, which we think will be in around the $8,000 mark. We have also increased enforcement expenses in the budget this year as we experienced large volumes of visitors during the pandemic in 2020. We have increased bylaw enforcement, and in addition, a new item approved by council is summer policing that's been included for a total of $23,000 for 2021 and 2022. We've also included increase for beachfront maintenance and safety. There were definitely increased costs for garbage removal and supplies, washroom facilities and maintenance, as well as supplies, and personal protective equipment supplies that we saw substantial increases during 2020, and we anticipate the same increases for this year. The fire department has also identified increase in fire department expenses related to COVID-19. It will include PPE supplies that they use substantially more than they do normally, and also training supplies. They will be requiring to purchase mannequins as they can no longer practice first aid requirements on mouth-to-mouth on individuals. Under communications, we'll also see website upgrades, GIS, Zoom meetings, and public consultation needs, which will result in additional costs over and above the normal. General capital projects. The Floodgate safety upgrade is a carry forward from 2020. The stairs to the Floodgate will be funded by reserves at a cost of about $15,000. Equipment also carried forward from 2020, $10,000 for a water bottle filling station. This will be funded by gas tax. The Arts Center disability access was mostly completed in 2020, but there is a remaining item, which is the ramp railing, and this again will be funded from gas tax. Additional office equipment and furniture will be required in 2021 for a total of $26,500. That will include audio video equipment for Memorial Hall funded by the COVID grant, $10,000. Laptops for the Memorial Hall Council meetings, COVID grant funded. With our archives, we require more filing cabinets and shelving funded from office equipment reserves, and our annual computer replacement of $4,500, also funded from reserves.
Excuse me, Ms. Jones,
Yep.
Councillor Hooper.
Yes, hello. If we can, we've got the Arts Centre disability access. Now, have we completed all the works on that so far, apart from the railings? I mean, the doors and the ramp. And if so, how much has all that come to at the moment? Because I think we had in the budget somewhere in the region of over $40,000 for that.
Ms. Jones.
I'll pass that to Michelle.
Thank you, Your Worship. The upgrades to date have come under budget. There's $9,900 remaining in that budget to complete the upgrades. The ramp railing is almost complete. And in addition to that, we anticipated including a accessible parking stall. So that will also come under this budget.
So we're under budget, but we want to have another $10,000 almost to just put in some railings, correct?
No, this is included in the original budget. This is a carry forward.
Right, thank you. And the water bottle filling stations, I thought we voted against that originally on the RMI money.
That came back again, we voted in favour.
And we've got laptops for the Memorial Council meetings. Whose laptops are we talking about?
This will be laptops for staff to use during the meetings.
Rightio, thank you.
Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Hooper brought up the question regarding laptops for council meetings. So I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jones, carry on.
Thank you, Your Worship. Also under general capital projects, the fire department building, there's a grant application currently being considered for the expansion of the fire department building. Fire department equipment, there is $76,000 for fire department equipment this year. The final phase of the SCBA replacement, which was approved by council and will be reserve funded, and the compressor, which was already approved by council, and that will also be reserve funded. In addition, there will be a fire truck that requires replacement, estimated at $650,000. Council has approved the inclusion for 2021, 2022, as we may need to make a down payment in 2021. This will be reserve funded from the fire department reserves, and up to $200,000 from surplus has been approved by council for funding for this item. Public works vehicles, $40,000. The replacement of the electric vehicle with a Kubota RTV is being proposed and being for funding by reserves. And the portable trailer, the village office has had approval of $75,000 through the COVID grant fund to purchase another portable trailer.
Good, Ms. Jones. Councillor Hooper.
Yes, on the fire truck replacement and the fire hall building, is there any scope, this is for the operation manager, is there any scope to actually get a larger vehicle and then increase the height of the doors within the same expansion grant?
Currently, the building is going to remain the same size, so the building or the truck that is purchased will have to fit the building.
So we don't intend to actually, if we get a bigger truck for less money, to actually spend that money on increasing the height of the doors for the fire hall?
That is not being considered at this time.
Thank you.
Carry on, Ms. Jones.
Again, under general capital projects, under roads, the road to the wastewater treatment plant, the grant submission has been approved by council. It's estimated $425,000. Under trails, a trail on Mccoombs, a grant submission has been approved by council and has been included in the budget at $350,000. For drainage, Hot Springs Road, grant submission has been approved by council for 2021 and 2022, and it's $2.1 million. It's about $2 million in grant and $100,000 set aside from gas tax for a contingency. Bus shelters. There are 2 proposed bus shelters funded in a cost share, and the village will be using gas tax funding, and BC Transit will be also sharing in the cost. And our share of this will be $14,000. And there's also the boat launch dock deck replacement, which will be reserve funded at a cost of $20,000 has been included.
Ms. Jones, Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Ms. Jones. The two bus shelters, is that in addition to the bus shelters we already have, or is that replacement?
Those are two additional bus shelters.
Do we know where they would be located?
I'll pass that question on to Ms. Shell.
Thank you.
The two locations are not specifically determined at this time, but we're working with BC Transit to get ridership numbers, but anticipate it to be one on Mccoombs and one on Hot Springs Road.
Thank you.
Councillor Piper, the CAO has a comment.
Yes, Your Worship, there is a report coming forward from the Manager of Community Services on this issue to the first regular meeting in February.
Councillor Piper?
No, I was asking about the bus shelters. I'm just curious, can you see when I raise, do you have a monitor in front of you and you can see when I raise my hand, or should I do something else?
No, just leave your hand up. I'm going around with my eyes all the time, so just leave your hand up and I'll catch you. Thank you. Ms. Jones?
Under the Resort Municipality Initiative included in the budget is the beach redevelopment project, berm project. This will require $200,000 from RMI funds, and there's a grant application for $962,000. Included in the budget is total cost of $1.162 million. In addition, tourism infrastructure and programming under the resort development strategy included in the budget is $343,500 for the commitment to Tourism Harrison for events, administration of performance measures and reportings and meetings, beach and lagoon improvements, the rink fire pit, boat launch building renovation, and fountain improvements.
Yeah, the beach redevelopment and the tourist infrastructure program, now, they've still got to come to council yet. Is that correct?
Who's taking this one?
I'll hand this one over to Michelle.
This project was part of the Lagoon Master Plan that was received by Council in November 2019. If the grant is approved, we will be bringing back anything to Council that we are required to under the procurement policy.
But the actual projects haven't come to council yet for these.
The conceptual drawings have been received by Council under the Lagoon Master Plan.
Sorry, I can't hear.
The conceptual plans have been received by Council under the Lagoon Master Plan.
But they've still got to come back to council for final approval.
I'll leave that to the CAO to answer.
McDonald?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Council. No, these projects have been reviewed and endorsed by Council. Certainly at the cost level that we're looking at for some of these projects, they would have to come back for award in terms of letting contracts for the actual construction. Yeah. The phase that we're at right now is the environmental investigations. Those are going forward.
Yeah, the question I asked is, it's the first I've seen of a rink fire pit.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about the big berm project, the beach redevelopment.
Well, the whole lot up there. But the rink fire pit, that's the first I've seen of it. I've heard about it.
Oops, I'll pass that over to Ms. Shell.
Yeah, the rink fire pit, propane fire facility area was included in the Lagoon Master Plan.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's Councillor Vidal.
Thank you. I note fountain improvements. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that involves?
Michelle?
The fountain improvements is just one small carryover item that we wanted to complete. It's ability to change out the colors of the lighting without having to go right up to the fountain. And that the piece of technology that we wanted just hadn't been released at the time yet. So we're just waiting on that to come available.
Thank you. And that was included in the initial cost for the fountain?
Yes.
That's correct. It was included in the initial cost, and we do have a carryover item to cover it.
Thank you, Michelle.
And this has been one of the most asked questions in the community at the moment is having colored lights on that fountain. So that's good. Okay, nobody else at the moment. Carry on, Mr.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Palmer.
I may have missed this. The tourism infrastructure programming, the 343.5, is there a breakdown on how each of those would be paid? Would they all be paid through, like a norm above it shows it coming from the RMI grant for the beach redevelopment, but the items on the tourism infrastructure, they will all fund out of RMI as well, or?
Yes, this is all funded from resort municipality money. So all through RMI, except for the portion identified as grant.
All right. So all of those 6 items. Okay.
Yes,
all of those 7 items in this, and that's
yes.
what I was interested in, the collection of small items, that they were all covered by RMI.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That's correct.
Thank you. Anybody else at the moment? Okay, carry on, Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moving on to wastewater operating and capital. Under operations, the wastewater utilities is operated on a cost recovery basis. Revenue in 2020 was impacted by the closure of the Harrison Hot Springs public pool during the pandemic. 2021 revenue will continue to be impacted until the pool reopens. Expenses will continue to be monitored closely during 2021. Under the capital items included in the budget is the lift station 1 upgrade at $600,000, which will be DCC funded. And lift station number 7 is also included at $1.55 million. A grant application for $1.1 million was approved by council, and the other $450,000 will be funded by DCC. Moving on to the water utility is also operated on a cost recovery basis. User fee revenue will increase as new developments connect to the water system. Expenses will be monitored closely to ensure budget is met and any impact caused by the pandemic on revenue is addressed. Debt repayment for the reservoir was completed in 2020, and capital expenditures for 2021 are identified at $275,000 and include the expansion of water south on St. Alice between Lillooet and Cedar, which is DCC funded, and membrane replacement at the water treatment plant, which will be reserve funded. Moving on to reserves. Included in the budget package that was distributed as part of the agenda was an update, as I believe had been requested by Councillor Piper in an earlier meeting, on the reserves. These are estimates at this time of the ending balances as of 2020. They're included in your package as we are still working on year-end numbers. And also, so we have budgeted reserve contributions during 2021 for general infrastructure, $370,000. Office equipment will be 10, building and structures 15, gas tax 117, fire department equipment 45,000, and the additional fire department 2020 operating surplus of 38,000, and 30,000 for public works equipment, for a total of 625,000. In addition, wastewater reserves will budgeted contributions are 224,000, and water reserves 102,300. Budgeted transfers from reserves to fund those capital projects identified will be 417,500. Development cost charges. Development cost charges at the end of 2020 are as follows. Parks development cost charges, 543,752. Drainage, 957,508. Sewer, 1,744,161. And water DCs at 1,501,729. Budgeted transfers out in 2021 are currently at sewer at 1,050,000 and water at 125,000. Moving on to the municipal tax requirements for 2021. As identified earlier, the requirement for 2021 is at 2 million.
Excuse me, Ms. Jones. Administrator?
Yes, excuse the interruption, Your Worship, but I might suggest that Council consider moving to in camera for just a portion of time for the purpose of releasing a decision that was made in the in-camera council meeting this morning, which has impact on the rest of the presentation.
So we'll rise and go to a closed meeting.
You'd need to entertain a motion to do so.
I need a motion for that, please. Moved by Councillor Vital, seconded by Councillor Palmer. Call the question. And Councillor Piper, we're okay there. Call the question. All in favour? Hello? Yeah, thank you, Councillor. We're in camera at the moment. Pardon?
Are we disengaged from Zoom? Ms. Shell?
Please hold while I'm doing that.
All in favour? Thank you. And now we're going to reconvene to the open meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would suggest that the corporate officer now report out the motion that was entertained in this morning's meeting.
Are we back on with the public now?
Michelle, are we ready?
And Councillor Piper is on. Yes,
Yes,
okay.
we have resumed recording and the public is now back in the room.
We're okay now? Thank you. Yes, Ms. Key?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to advise council and report out on a matter that was before an in-camera meeting this morning. The item was a report from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding occupational health and safety work, COVID-19 Restart Grant. The recommendation that was brought forward that $50,000 be added to the 2021-2025 financial plan for 2021 and 2022 to develop and implement a new occupational health and safety plan, inclusive of provisions for pandemic safety on an ongoing basis. Report out that motion as was brought to council failed, and that's the end of that report, Your Worship.
Thank you. And we carry on now with Ms. Jones. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through you, thank you for entertaining that brief adjournment to in camera for the purpose of reporting out that decision that was made earlier today. It does have impact on this particular slide that the financial officer is about to present. And with that, I would turn it over to Ms. Jones for further comment.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. While the removal of that item from the budget through COVID grant funding does not have impact on the budget or taxation, there has not been an amount included in the budget for funding of the requirements for occupational health and safety training for 2021 that are still legislated requirement. And so it's anticipated that up to $10,000 will be required to be added to the budget for the necessary training that will need to be done in 2021 as per legislation.
Good evening, Ms. Jones. Councillor Palmer.
Microphone, please.
Microphone.
Got
Thank
it. Mike. Certainly the discussion we had and in camera can't discuss, but we had voted against including 50,000 in for the next 2 years. I would be agreeable to putting forward a motion that we allocate 50,000 for the 2021 year from the COVID restart grant. So it's a commitment for the 1 year, so that that would save us having to find the $10,000 from our general revenue, and would allow us to go ahead. My concern, of course, was the size of the amount. So at $50,000, I would find that more comfortable. So I would make a motion that we put the $50,000 into the budget for that purpose, but only for the 2021 year, budget year. Yes.
For this year. Do we have a seconder for that?
We don't require a seconder, actually. This is a cow.
So discussion, Councillor Vidal and Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want clarification on the motion, if it could be read out again.
Certainly, I can do that, Your Worship. The motion that was put by Councillor Palmer is that $50,000 be added to the 2021-2025 financial plan for 2021 to develop and implement a new occupational health and safety plan, inclusive of provisions for pandemic safety on an ongoing basis.
Thank you.
Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Worship. Can you hear me fine?
Coming through fine.
I was honestly confused by the motion made by Councillor Palmer. It was not clear, so I'm asking for a point of clarification. Since I was not partaking in the in-camera discussion, I understand now that he's bringing forward a recommendation based on those discussions from this morning's in-camera. So I'm asking for some advice how to recluse myself from participating in the discussion, or since it's on the table, I just don't want to be in a position of conflict.
CAO has a comment on that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Piper and the rest of Council, without straying into any of the personnel type discussions that were entertained in the in-camera meeting, we can certainly identify that the request from staff is for these funds in order to do a comprehensive review and update of our OH&S plan, our occupational health and safety plan, through a COVID lens, but also in a broader way to ensure that we are operating under the best health and safety standards possible. Ms. Jones, do you have further to add to that?
Ms. Jones?
Thank you, Your Worship. The funds were for review of the plan and would also include training necessary for staff throughout the organization on any updates to the plan.
Does that help answer your question, Councillor Piper?
Yeah, I still feel like I should excuse myself, so I'm not in any position of conflict. So I'm sorry, it just was not clear what was being brought forward there. So I guess we're too far into it that I will not be participating like I have in the previous discussions. So what's the best course of action?
I can move her to the waiting room if she wishes to excuse herself.
Can put you to the waiting room, Councillor, is that fine?
Thank you.
Thank you. Palmer.
The motion read back, but
pardon, Councillor Hooper was first. Councillor Hooper?
Yeah, I just want to go over Councillor Palmer's motion. So you want to allocate from the COVID-19 Safe Restart Programme 50,000 to this year's budget?
Yes. Yes.
It confuses me because this is something we voted on the in camera. So I'll leave it at that. Oh.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
First off, when the Chief Administrative Officer, or I'm sorry, Chief Corporate Officer read back the motion, I think an important part of that was that the funds come from the COVID restart. I didn't hear that read out, that that would be funded by the COVID restart funds. And so that's number one in terms of the motion that I made. And secondly, in answer to Councillor Hooper's question, the motion that was read out that we refused earlier was the commitment of $50,000 in 2020 and $50,000 in 2021 for a total of $100,000 to come from the COVID restart funds. And I certainly, not obligated to say, but I voted against it simply because of the $100,000. It was the amount, the fact that we have health and safety reviews. There's nothing that I can say that to negate that. It seems like a good project, but the amount that it took so much of the remaining COVID restart funds available for some other future need. So that's why, although I didn't support it for 100,000, 50,000 a year, I am prepared to support it for the 1 year, and it can go into the budget. We can always take a look in the future if it's necessary to put more money in, but then we would be able to know what other demands there may be on those funds. So my reason for the motion is, to my mind, I'm prepared to commit to 50,000, but not to $100,000. That's the difference between what we refused and what I'm proposing now.
Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, I'm somewhat still confused on this because we've already been told that up to 100,000 might not be enough to actually cover this. So if we go 50,000 now, are we going to have to complete the project, go further into our budgets or further into the restart money? It's confusing because we don't know what the costs are going to be. And I don't want to get involved in anything where the costs are suddenly going to be, well, you've actually done half the program, now you've got to do the second half, which is going to cost even more. So, no, thank you.
It's one of those situations, Councillor, where this is an estimate of a budget for this consultant. Obviously, if during the process it turns out that more consultation is required or more training, whatever the case may be, because we don't know at the moment that extra funding might be required, and that's not an unusual thing to come before council to make a recommendation from the staff that extra funding might be required to complete this program. So that's nothing that cannot be carried out by council.
Yeah, my point is that should we have something else come up and we spend the rest of this COVID-19 restart grant before this training is complete, then it will have to come out of general funds.
It could come out from general funds, or it could come out maybe from, I'll leave any, the finance officer, would you have any comment on what fund that, if that possibility ever came about?
It would have to be discussed with council at the time and brought forward as an item. And if it was for the 2022 budget and it was prior to adoption of the budget, it could potentially come from taxation, should that be the wish of council, or from the surplus. The training is legislatively required under the occupational health and safety legislation. It's a requirement for us to train our staff in safety. So it's not something that can be avoided without risking a lot of liability.
Thank you. Like I said earlier, Councillor Corrigan, if extra funding is required, this will come before council at the appropriate time. But like I said, we don't know. I think it's an important issue that this be put in place, these requirements. for the health and safety of our staff. And again, as we've done in the past, when it's been required to add to a project, if it's underestimated, that it would come before council, then it would be council's wish whether to go forward or not go forward, as the financial officer just explained.
Yeah, just get this clear. This is 50,000 that will go to a consultant to come in and actually do the training package. Yes?
That's correct. That's correct.
Thank you.
Different opinions here. The CEO, you have a comment?
Your Worship, just for clarification. So what we're proposing here is a review and a revision of our entire occupational health and safety plan, as far as we can get with that, through a COVID lens, certainly. And then training as required. We would rely upon a third-party expert to point out where we need some extra training, which we know we do. Thank you.
Yeah, who would carry out this review though? Would it be staff themselves or would it be an outside consultant?
We're looking for some professional expert help to work with our staff to review the existing health and safety plan, which hasn't been reviewed for quite some time.
Thank you.
I just, going to the issue of what it costs is one of the areas that I had a challenge with in the earlier discussion. If we were buying a new fire truck, which I gather we're going to be doing, if we're buying a new fire truck and we have certain specifications, then we're committed to buy the fire truck, and then the quotes come in, and we buy the fire truck at whatever the best price we can, we're paying that amount of money. When we're doing training and policies, I don't think it's that exact amount of money. So it's not like, is it going to cost 106,000 or is it going to cost 83,000? It seems to me you could do health and safety training for the village of Harrison and spend $500,000 if you had the money to do it. There's no set amount where you suddenly have reached the point and you have everybody have perfect training. So it seems to me it's one of those issues where you set a budget. So right now, if we say we'll allocate $50,000 for it, then the program will take $50,000. If it requires more, then it's a case of coming back and someone saying, oh, we need a bit more money to do this further training. But whatever we do, the training has value. The new policies that we developed have value. It's not like, oh, there's not enough money. We can only buy 2/3 of a fire truck and it's of no value. Whatever we do will have value. So my position is I'm prepared to commit 50, not 100, but I'm prepared to commit 50 and see where we go on that with the ability to reevaluate later on. My concern in the earlier discussion was that if there was $162,000 that we have not allocated in those COVID Fresh Start funds that we can only use for that purpose, that if we allocated 100 now, left 62, and things could happen that could cause, that could require some further need of those funds. At this particular point, I understand from my questions earlier, we're not aware of anything on the horizon that's going to need that amount of money. But nonetheless, out of prudence, I was concerned about taking that and not having that option. So that is why, it may well be that we come back a year from now and we put more money in because we have nothing else we can do with those funds because we can't just divert them over to general revenue. So that's why, as I said, I'm prepared to support the 50 rather than the 100. It still leaves over $100,000 for another need, even though we haven't identified it at this point, but I don't know the future. So that was important to me to keep a sizable amount available. And I think 50,000 allows us to start the project. If we don't put more money in at later on, if more money is needed, we will still have revised many of our programs or our policies. We will have already provided some staff training. Will it be enough? I don't know, but I don't know that there's ever enough staff training. Like it's not a magic amount, like that's it. So we will have improved things. So I'm feeling quite comfortable in supporting the 50 rather than the 100 because the 50 seems to me to be more acceptable. And at the same time, if we don't use the funds at all, I also don't want to be in a position that a year and a half from now, we haven't found any acceptable use for the programs, for the funds from the provincial government. They don't qualify and we have to send them back. So it's a fine balance. So that's my reason for proposing 50 when I voted against the 100. Thank you.
Thank you. That's why for elaborating what I was saying earlier in regards to the unknowns when you're dealing with a situation like this. Before I give it to Councillor Hooper, the corporate officer has a comment.
Your Worship, I can wait until Councillor Hooper is finished, and I'll just wanted to reread the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Yep. My concern is that if we spend the rest of this restart money beforehand, any further training money will come out of the General Revenue Fund. And at $50,000 or more, that is over 2.25% increase in our taxes. So we'll be asking the residents to pay for training, which should already be been carried out by staff. It's just train one member of staff to come in and train the rest. That's all we need to do. Thank you.
Obviously, Councillor, the administration has brought this to our table, that the staff need this particular type of consultation before they can move forward in dealing with their own committees in regards to health and safety. If we did not have this restart money, which is a gift, this would probably still be on the table for us to make a decision on whether we would go forward with this or not. So the restart money is there till it runs out. If again, I will reiterate what I said, if we do not have, if we're dealing with unknowns here at the moment, but it's an important issue when it comes to the health and safety of the workers in our village. And I keep emphasizing this. It's the money, the money is there at the moment. If for some reason the consultation turns out to be a little bit more than anticipated a year down the road, then it will come back to the table for council to discuss and make a decision. And I'll give it now to Councillor, oh, sorry, before I give it to Councillor Vidal, you have another question?
Yeah, I mean, we have a occupational health and safety policy at the moment, I take it. So all we need to do is to have the one person trained up in the pandemic side of this to actually go ahead. I don't see that it's going to cost 50,000, 100,000 on that. Unless we, I mean, if we think of training everybody up, that's a complete waste of time and money. We need just to train the person up that's in charge of the occupational health and safety plan, and then they can train the rest of the staff as and when needed on the appropriate time and place. Thank you.
I'll let the corporate officer read it out in a second, but before I carry on, Councillor Vidal had a comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to thank Councillor Palmer for elaborating on the motion and your reasons for bringing it forward. Occupational health and safety is a very important issue in the workplace, and given that the current pandemic and future pandemics, I do think it is imperative that a consultant do take a look at what the existing occupational health and safety plan is, and to be able to identify the gaps and what may or may not be needed on a broader scale I think putting the horse before the cart is a little premature here. I would be very interested in seeing the results of the consultant's report, and perhaps at that time, if additional funding is needed, council can then discuss that. So with that, I am in favor of the motion. Your worship, thank you.
So the corporate office, if there's no other questions, corporate officer, you're going to read out the motion again?
Yes, Your Worship, I will do that. The motion moved by Councillor Palmer is that $50,000 be added to the 2021-2025 financial plan in 2021 to develop and implement a new occupational health and safety plan, inclusive of provisions for pandemic safety on an ongoing basis, to be funded from the COVID Restart Grant.
I will now call, before I call the question, Councillor Palmer, you have another comment?
I'm sorry.
Please turn your mic on, Councillor.
Sorry, I apologize. I wanted to address the comment, I guess from Councillor Hooper, that if we commit to this, then if the money's not in the COVID, left in the COVID restart funds next year, then we're committing to come up with 50,000 from taxpayers' dollars, and I think he came up with a 2.25 tax increase out of it. And I just want to make the point that is not at all what this does. This commits $50,000 now. And if we decide we need to do more next year, we will be able to look at, if we do more next year, we will be able to look at where the funding would be. And I don't think this in any way commits us to putting the cost back against the taxpayer. It seems to me that if we do need to do more, and my hope is we don't, that 50,000 is adequate. But if it's not, we can look at what's available in the COVID restart fund. But it in no way commits us that we're going to pass a tax increase through to residents. And I think it's unreasonable and unfair to say that. That's not what the intention of the motion is. It's allocating 50, not 100. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will now call the question. All in favour? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Hooper. The motion passes.
Thank you, Michelle. Can you let Councillor Piper back into the meeting?
You're back on, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, we'll move on with Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. Municipal tax requirements for 2021. As identified at the beginning of the meeting, the requirement for municipal tax for 2021 is $2,425,128. This is an increase in tax in 2021, a total increase of $102,228 over the 2020 amounts. Tax that we will receive from growth is approximately $42,152, and then there'd be a tax increase of $60,076 to make up the $102,000 in tax requirements. The tax assessment completed roll for 2021 showed total assessed values of properties within the village at $721,141,02. The non-market change for 2021, also known as the growth of new properties, $16,228,400, and the overall change to the assessment on the 2021 completed roll, including the growth, was $32,305,884. In the residential class of properties, the overall increase to assessment was 3.78%. For the business class, there was a decrease in assessed values of 0.58%, and the change in recreational class was an increase of 3.29% for the properties as a whole. The estimated tax rates for 2021 are as follows, and council has been given this sheet if it's a little easier to read in front of them. So on your sheets in front of you, it's the top slide is, top amount is the slide up here. So this, the estimate based on the completed rolls that we received at the end of December 2020 is that the residential assessment is approximately 86.3 of the total assessed value. 12% is with the business class, and recreational nonprofit is 1.7% of the total. For status quo purposes, I've used an example of the same ratios that are currently in effect for the 2020. That is with the ratio for residential is always at 1, and the others are a multiplier of that residential. Current business tax rate ratio is 3 for the business and 3.5 for the recreation nonprofit. What this results in is a rate of $2.60, $2.60 per $1,000 of assessed value on the residential class 1 properties, $7.80 per $1,000 on the business class properties, and the recreation nonprofit of $9.10 per $1,000 of assessed value. An example of the impact of the municipal tax rate in 2021 using the status quo. So the tax change impact on a $600,000 property that has no assessment increase or decrease, that same $600,000 property would see an annual increase compared to 2020 for the municipal portion of taxes only at $1.84 or 0.12%. For the business class, it would be $5.51 on the same $600,000 property. And if you were in the recreational class, it would be $6.42 change from one year to the next. On the next slide, I show the impact on the same $600,000 property with the average assessment increase or decrease identified earlier. So for residential purposes, if a property had the average tax increase for residential of 3.78%, so their $600,000 property was now valued at $622,680, the annual increase on their property tax would be $60.81, an increase of 3.9%. For a business class who had the average decrease of 0.58, they would have gone from $600,000, their property would now be worth $596,520. They would have a decrease in their annual taxes of $21.64, or a reduction of 0.46% compared to 2020. And in the recreational class for $600,000, the average increase of 3.29% would result in an increase in value of $19,740 to that property and an annual increase of $186.09, a 3.41% increase. Oops. That's the end of the presentation. If anybody has any, council has any further questions.
Any further questions on the presentation from Ms. Jones from council? Councillor Palmer.
This is more of a memory question. Last year, the proposed multiplier on residential and commercial, we had a specific number, and then we adjusted it at the last meeting where we discussed the budget because it was going to result in perhaps too much of a hardship on businesses. What was the multiplier? I know, what was the multiplier that we had initially before we did that readjustment?
The multiplier on the business was 3.17, and for the recreation, I think 3.75. I think I'd have to verify those for you.
And the multiplier that we eventually decided on was
the status quo example I've given today, 3 and 3.5 for the business went to 3, and the rec nonprofit went to 3.5. It was a reduction in both of those categories.
Okay, it's just my. I would be interested in, and I know you can't do this right now. In my mind, last year when we did the readjustment, it was a 1-year effort to help businesses because it seemed that their increase was going to be quite high. This year, with the business assessments having gone down a bit, that doesn't seem to be the issue this year. In fact, businesses would do quite well on status quo. It was my thought last year when we decided to change the multiplier that it was probably fair to go back to the multiplier that we previously had. And that's what my suggestion will be this year, that it was a 1-year help for businesses. It wasn't certainly my thought there would be a permanent readjustment. And this year it seems to me there's no need for that permanent readjustment. Not that I'm saying the business climate is great, but I'm saying that the assessed values for businesses seems to have declined. So I'd be interested in seeing how the numbers would work based on the number that we had before we did that adjustment to help businesses last year. And that would, I think, increase business taxes a little, but it would certainly probably be helpful for residential. So that's my question. I don't expect you to provide that number right now, but that's a sheet I'd like to see. What would the taxes be if we went back to where we had the number that we originally intended the multiplier before we kind of did a little engineering to try and help businesses?
Yes, to return to that would result in a change in those things where taxation would come away from the residential properties and go onto the business and recreational class of properties, because both of those categories that changed last year were to change back again, that would result in that, yes.
So that was my question is I'd be interested in seeing what that number would
okay,
be.
Yeah.
Because again, my point simply was last year when we did this, I thought of it as a 1-year relief for businesses. It wasn't, in my mind, an attempt to create an alteration of the formula on a long-term basis, but it was reacting to a 1-year blip in business valuations.
Yes, I can certainly provide that to this same sheet to council with those items changed back to what they were last year, so council could see both of those.
Thank you.
Yes, before I give it to Councillor Hooper, that my understanding was that it was due to COVID. I'm not sure whether maybe the 1 year did come out, but I thought it was due to the COVID to give some relief to the businesses. Of course, we may have anticipated in our own minds that this COVID situation would be in a better state than what it is now, but it's although the vaccinations are coming through the state with the other variants coming into place with this COVID, is causing more problems. So I'm not convinced that this would be a better year. It could even be worse for the businesses overall. And I'm including all the businesses, including the accommodation sector as well. So, but of course, the financial officer will come back with those numbers for you. But that was my understanding. Councillor Hooper?
Yeah, following on from Councillor Palmer's question. This doesn't set our tax rate at the moment, does it?
Jones?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Hooper. No, it does not. This was just to give council an estimate so they could see a visual of what their current status quo would have with these changes. We come back with the actual tax rate bylaw as a separate item. And what we do at this time is just look for guidance from council, because that is a separate decision for council to make as to what the tax rate and the share of the tax rates. So yes, we do come back with a separate tax rate bylaw for that once council's made their decision.
Yeah, because last year we increased the residential tax rate, even though the assessments went down by over 2%, 2.8%, I think it was. And we increased the residential tax rate to help the businesses out. And again, I'm with Councillor Palmer on this one. Although I voted against the increase in the residential taxes last year, I feel that maybe we should be equaling this out a little bit more and probably going back to the original multipliers of the 2019. Thank you.
Before I give it to Councillor Vidal, the corporate officer has a comment. Oh, sorry, CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wonder, on the slide where there's the tax change impact on a $600,000 property with the average assessment increase. So for the people in the room here, that's the bottom of the page. Is that the one? Yeah. Yeah, that's the one. Tracy, can you just clarify for me, say in the residential section there where we're looking at a 3.9% increase, all things being equal, is there, what role does growth play in that, if any? Oh, Mike, thanks.
When we talk about the, this is what a typical house after we've factored in the growth into the calculation. So this is what a $600,000 house. Now, when I use the average of 3.78, that's from the assessment rolls on the total properties in residential, all types of changes. For example, just for clarification for council, residential vacant land had a 14.52% increase. Residential single family had a 3.17. Residential ALR 1.32. Residential strata 3.78, and residential other 3.36, which averaged out to 3.78% overall on the total residential. So I just used the 3.78 from overall. Having looked at a sample of residential properties within the village to see where they lay, I looked at some samples. What I saw in residential were we did have some folks that had a decrease in their assessed value. We did have people who had status quo and had no increase whatsoever. We saw people with minimal increase of under 2%. And we saw those with increases in values at 4.9%. So on the properties I looked at, there was a range of impacts. So that's what why I showed this for somebody with no increase whatsoever under the current status quo, 0.12% increase in taxation. If you go with the average, the person would have 3.9%.
Thank you. That's a good explanation, actually, on how the tax burdens work out. It's not always that you're being impacted by a tax. And here we're looking at a $600,000, approximately $60 for the year.
Your Worship, on the example where we're saying somebody who had the average 3.78% increase in their assessed value for a residential property would see approximately $60.81 in the year increase to the municipal portion of their taxes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, and it's something. So it's a good example. Thank you. Before I give it to Councillor Hooper, Councillor Vidal was next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Jones. If you can also jar my memory, did we not also pass that we would extend the date, last year extend the date for submission of property taxes because of COVID?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Vidal. Yes, last year what occurred was the ministry extended the date to September 30th for businesses to pay their taxes instead of the normal date of July 2nd. Council voted to also extend that to residential, to all class of properties for the village. What we saw was many property owners still paid on the regular deadline. And we saw significant change in people paying on time. And that was reflected in current penalties. We normally see approximately $38,000 in penalties each year on current taxes. And it reduced down to about $17,000 last year. So what our takeaway from that was people still had the money to pay their taxes. Maybe it was because they couldn't travel, and who knows. But we saw more people paid on time and didn't incur penalties.
Thank you. And just on a related topic, I know that the village is now no longer going to be collecting the homeowner grant on behalf of the province. And I have had some inquiries as to why that has happened. And I believe it came down from the province. It wasn't an undertaking that the village took. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Vidal. The ministry has been talking about this for a number of years. Their reasoning behind this was many of the homeowner grants, they were challenged with auditing the validity of those people claiming the grant. So the ministry has made the decision to change that they will collect the grant, and I believe they are asking additional information, including the social insurance number for somebody applying. That is data the municipalities would not want to be responsible for storing that type of data. And the ministry has decided that is an audit mechanism where they can more readily verify through other records that are available to them the validity of grants being claimed.
Thank you. That's all, Your Worship.
Councillor Hooper.
Yeah. Why do we base it on 600,000 when the majority of the properties in Harrison now are reaching over 600,000? I mean, where do we get this 600,000 from as a comparison between us and the businesses? Because some of the businesses, the larger ones within the village, they're worth millions. So their annual increase would actually drop by a substantial amount of money. So I just want to know where we get this, why we're going for 600,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship, through you to Councillor Hooper. It's just an example. You could do that and multiply the 600,000 by 2 if you had a $1.2 million property. It's just a number that was picked as a reasonable amount. We have properties that go from the stratified properties that are selling in the $400,000 range to properties that do sell much higher. So it was just a number that was deemed to be an easy number to relate and could be easily multiplied for anybody who wanted to double it, halve it, or anything like that.
But the larger businesses would see a substantial decrease in their annual rate. I mean, like the large hotel would actually see somewhere in the region of maybe $22,000, $24,000 decrease.
I can't answer the exact amount on that one right now because I'm not sure of the assessed value for specific properties. But on a $1.2 million property, the business class would have a $40 change. So I'm not sure of how a $22,000, there'd have to be a substantial assessed value for a 0.46% decrease to come to $22,000.
Right, thank you.
Okay, just to remind council, this is a draft that we've had here today, and it's all going to come back to us again, and the assessments haven't all, you don't have the full assessment roll as yet, I assume.
We received the completed roll at the end of December, as we always do.
Councillor Palmer.
One
Mike,
last question.
please.
I've done it. Hello? I have one last question, and I think you've given me the number. The number, you gave a number for new assessments, and I take it that represents construction. So items that, residences that didn't exist in the previous tax year. Is that correct? And I think the number was $40,000. Is that correct?
So on this slide, that the tax from growth, $42,000, that's if we'd had the new ones, which is the $16 million in place last year with last year's rates, we would have generated another $40,000. Then we do an increase on top of that. So that is growth. That's new properties that are coming, that came online that didn't exist on the assessment last year.
So that's, I'm sorry, that's the $42,000.
Yes.
It just, yeah, and that's interesting to know. It just hits me that I would have expected a much higher number when I look at all of the newer residences that would have been covered by the assessment for July of 2020. It just, there seems to be so many new residences that 40,000 just seems, anecdotally, not statistically, but anecdotally, yeah. it seems low. I'm having a hard time reconciling what I see with that number, particularly since last year the number was less than I thought it would be for new construction.
What we visually see in new construction that we think might be on the assessment roll isn't always on at the timing of doing that. So for example, if a lot of land is separated into individual parcels, the value of that land portion would have come on in a different year when BC Assessment valued the land. The build portion is often exists after that in a prior year. So where you may look at a house and think there's a $400,000 or $500,000 increase, it may have been split over 2 years because the land came on when it was parceled out at one point, and the build portion came out when it finished a year later. Some of these developments are, the strata developments are phased developments, so they don't exist. We haven't seen all of them. For the ones you may think visually you'd see, 386 Pine Avenue, those developments there, the duplexes that are also down there, and in addition, some on Schooner, and those that are on 750 Hot Springs Road. There's still a substantial amount of those to be added to the roll, and we anticipate by the time they complete, we'll see them on the roll still next year. So hopefully we will have another increase to the roll through growth continued for next year from the remainder of those properties.
Thank you. I accept it. It's statistics are statistics. Mm-hmm. It's just it's that matching up in terms of the number seems to my mind so much lower than I would have guessed, but obviously the number is what it is. I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, you have a comment?
Yes, not to interrupt the discussion. If there's further discussion, by all means, that's a good thing. But I wonder if there should be some direction to staff at this point to perhaps bring back a report with options for tax multipliers, because there has been some discussion today about perhaps reverting to values that were discussed last year. Council may want to debate that further when they have the numbers in front of them for comparison purposes.
Does council wish to direct staff to come back with some examples for the next meeting? So we need a move for the, moved by Councillor Vidal, seconded by Councillor Hooper. Any discussion on that? Call the question. All in favour? Thank you. Councillor Piper, thank you. Yep, that's fine. Thank you. That's passed. We'll get to the next order of business, please.
Yes, Your Worship, we'll move on to the next item, and that's a report from the Community Services Manager regarding pay parking proposals.
And the items from Councillor Piper that will come after or during the conversation?
Yeah, they'll be after the report.
After the report, okay. Michelle.
Thank you, Your Worship. The village has been running a pay parking program since 2016 to help offset the operations and maintenance costs associated with the public spaces and facilities along the waterfront, which come to approximately $260,000 per year. To continue with the program, the village issued an RFP for pay parking services in December of last year. One proponent responded to the RFP. In their proposal, Precise ParkLink suggests replacing the village's aging pay and display parking meters with more modern and user-friendly pay by license plate units. While this upgrade will cost approximately $10,000 more per year for all the units, not per unit, the significant benefits include real-time alarms that will minimize downtime and lost revenue, ease of use for patrons resulting in an improved visitor experience, and higher compliance. Staff is highly in favor of the upgraded technology, as there have been many reports from patrons that the current equipment is not user-friendly. Precise ParkLink also continues to work with parking apps that allow users to pay for parking, receive alerts that their time is expiring, and extend their time without having to return to a meter. Precise ParkLink also suggests that beginning the pay parking season on May 15th prior to Victoria Day would be in line with other neighboring resort or event destinations. It's estimated that this change could generate approximately $50,000 in additional revenue. As May is also when costs to maintain the beachfront amenities significantly rises to accommodate the visitors, staff is recommending this change. In 2020, a short-term parking zone with a 3-hour parking limit was introduced that include Hot Springs Road and Esplanade Avenue West, including St. Alice Street. While this was beneficial for some businesses, others requested a longer time period to accommodate patrons of their services or activities that last longer than 3 hours and are located in this zone. Staff is recommending that the time limit be increased to 4 hours and the escalating rate be changed to include $5 for the 4th hour to a maximum of 4 hours. So there are 3 separate recommendations for your consideration. The first one is that pay parking season begin on May 15th until September 15th annually. The second one, that an escalating rate of $2 for the 1st hour, $3 for the 2nd hour, $4 for the 3rd hour, and $5 for the 4th hour to a maximum of 4 hours be set for Hot Springs Road and Esplanade Avenue West, including St. Alice Street. The third recommendation is that the successful proponent, Precise ParkLink, be awarded the contract to provide pay parking services as submitted in their proposal dated January 6, 2021, for a term of 3 years with an option to extend for an additional 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's 3 separate moves here?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, so go with the first one. Recommend that the pay parking season begin May 15th and September the 15th annually. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Vidal, seconded by Councillor Piper. Discussion. Councillor Hooper.
So we're on the, from May or June? Which?
The first recommendation, the pay parking begin on May the 15th until September the 15th.
That's fine.
Okay, on that one, okay. Call the question. All in favour? Opposed, anybody? No, motion passes on that one. And the second recommendation, an escalating rate of $2 for the first hour, $3 for the second hour, $4 for the third hour, and $5 for the fourth hour to a maximum of 4 hours to be set for Hot Springs Road and Esplanade Avenue West, including St. Alice. Idle, seconded by Councillor Palmer. Discussion. Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Couple of questions for Ms. Shell. I'm assuming then that the rate with other areas will remain the same, and what is the rate for like an all day?
Michelle?
So the rate for all day and the other areas, the long-term parking zone is a maximum of $12 per day or $3 per hour. In this zone, the short-term parking zone, it would end up being a maximum of $14 per 4 hours.
All right, thank you. And I wanted to ask a question about the proposal for the new parking meters. I don't know whether that should be included in this recommendation or in recommendation number 3.
Number 3? Mike?
All right, thank you. I know at the end of the season last year, I did get a couple of concerns that the parking meters did not adequately indicate that it was a per license plate parking. And I just want to ensure that if these new parking meters are installed, that that is clearly indicated. And if we need to look at a little bit more of an educational component, just to clarify that with our visitors.
Joe?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that is by nature of these meters having to pay by license plate rather than pay and display, only one vehicle per stall, and having to insert your license plate number will be automatically the program. So I don't, if we were to stay with the pay and display meters, then we would probably want to educate people a little bit further about one vehicle per stall. But I think under these new meters, that problem would be resolved.
Good, thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Yes, thank you. I find the escalating rates are going to be rather confusing. I'd just like to see 2 rates, the $3 an hour, and after the 4th hour, $5 an hour. Having 2 for the first, 3 for the second, 4 for the, that's going to be very confusing to people. Also, is there any provisions for motorcyclists this year after we had the complaint of a number of motorcycle bays parking in one place and only one of them paying for it? A motorcycle is going to be told they have to park in the motorcycle bays only.
Cheryl, you have any comment on that?
For the first comment about the escalating rate, this was implemented last year and we didn't receive any complaints or feedback.
Sorry,
it was, if you turn your mic off, your speaker will get. Last year when the escalating rate was introduced, we didn't receive any feedback that anybody had a problem with it. And the reason for the escalating rate, the rationale last year was to encourage turnover in that area. And it seemed to be, it worked successfully. On the other question about motorcycles, we haven't received any direction or request from council to change the plan as one vehicle per stall. So we're open to making any accommodations council wishes in that area.
And I did bring us a late item up a couple of meetings ago about special dispensation for residents, about free parking in a couple of areas and time limited bays for them. with disabled bays for residents only. Has any consideration been given to this during this plan?
Michelle, do you have any comments on that?
We have not received any further
Turn
communication
your,
from council on this.
thing off, please. Thank you.
We haven't received any further communication from council on this at this time.
Has staff received any comments from the public at large from last year at all in regards to that?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to suggest that we make this area behind the Memorial Hall for residents parking only, with 2 of the bays there for disabled residents.
Doesn't come under the paid parking scheme.
Oh, well, in
no.
that case, can we do it for the side of the Memorial Hall then?
No, behind here is not part of the parking behind here.
Right.
So that's something I think could be referred back to staff to look at that. We're referring to the gravel piece behind us here for resident parking only, with a couple of handicap bays.
Certainly, if there's not enough handicap parking within the downtown area, we should look at that and identify places where we could add it, whether it be pay parking or in the non-pay parking area, such as back there. We have a bit of a difficulty with setting aside designated areas for residential parking because we don't have a way to police that, to determine who is a resident and to put an additional level of bylaw into police that. So that would be a challenge, but I think we should look at your suggestion with the handicap parking, additional stalls.
Yeah, I don't propose it to be totally free for residents. If they have to come into the village office and pay, say, $10 for a 1-year decal to go on their vehicles, that would solve all the problems. But the disabled parking would be for residents only. There are a number of disabled residents that have trouble getting down here to use the restaurants and the rest of it. So I'd like to see an area included. If not this area, then at the side of the Memorial Hall, excluding the electric bays. Thank you.
I think we should go back to staff to come back maybe with some idea, because I think maybe, like the CAO said, the other areas of the paid parking areas, we could maybe add another handicapped stall in there. They have to pay, of course, but for the disabled, not handicapped, disabled people.
Your Worship, before we start sort of tinkering on the fly with this sort of thing, I do note that Councillor Piper has added a strategic parking master plan to the agenda as a late item. And this sounds like the very type of issues that should be addressed within such a plan. Obviously, there are a number of things that could be looked at. So we'll get to that when we get to that, but I have some suggestions around that too, and we would want to incorporate Councillor Hooper's concerns and suggestions into that process, I think.
Okay, so let's leave it till we get to Councillor Piper's comments on the strategic planning for that.
One last question. The St. Alice Street, there's a number of bays that have now been taken out of operation because of the building construction there. Is this company being charged for the lease, these bays?
Have any comments from staff at the moment on that?
I can do it. So in the past talks with the developer prior to the end of the pay parking season last year, we advised them that they would be charged at a per stall basis if they needed it. They did not occupy the area until after the pay parking season was complete. We would bring the proposed change date of May 15th as the time that they will be charged, and it would be a per stall basis on a daily rate.
Thank you. Because looking at a number of bays and the bays they'd have to spend opposite for their operations as well, we're probably talking in the region of $15,000 to $17,000 lost revenue otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Palmer.
I wanted to ask a question, actually, of the Chief Financial Officer. So we've now determined that we're going to start on May 15th. And so when I look at the projections, I think we now project a revenue of $233,701 from paid parking this coming year in terms of the report that's been given to us. My question is, since we've now done that, and since we have to insert a projection into our financial plans, I notice you have it carried in as $220,000. Would you reflect that now as the $233,701, now that you know the answer to that we're going to go for May 15th? Could that then be reflected in so that $13,000 shows in revenue? So that $13,000 we don't have to raise from taxpayers? I know it's a projection, but we're working with projections on other issues as well. So that's my first question.
AO, a comment on that?
Sorry to jump in here, but again, I'm going to make reference to the fact that there's a parking master plan on the table for discussion later in the agenda. So when we looked at those two scenarios initially as staff, we had made the same observation as yourself, Councillor Palmer, that there would be a difference in projected revenues if council accepts the recommendation to go to May 15th. And we had in the back of our minds thought to allocate those extra revenues to a parking reserve. And there will be a further report coming forward on reserves later in the year. That's something that the financial officer is working on. And the purpose of such a reserve would be to develop parking, but also that reserve is where you would go to fund something such as a parking master plan. So there may be uses for those funds.
Councillor?
I guess continuing on, so that, thank you for your answer. The issue, of course, I think that the cost and the cleanup of the beach in the summer seems to always be a topic of much debate. And I think it's important the residents realize that, again, even the 220 that we have in the budget, that a large part of the cost of operating the beach are covered by the people who stay and pay for parking, and including recognizing that if, for instance, we were to say, well, let's take 20 spaces and make them available for residents, if in fact that were possible, or there's some $10 pass you could get, that's going to significantly reduce the revenue we get. And that money's going to have to come from somewhere else, which is their taxes. So I like to see, the money that we project coming, I certainly like to see it go into the budget so that residents can realize that what is coming off that front row is money that they're not having to pay on their taxes. So I know we'll have the discussion then about a reserve, but I do think that's important because there's always a huge amount of discussion about the costs of having tourists on the beach here and who's paying for it. So I think it's important that money be there for that. Other than that, we were talking initially, I don't think we voted on the 2, 3, 4, 5 yet. I think that's a good plan. I mean, we instituted that last year simply because we recognize that there's much less parking down there and there's many more businesses down there. And so some turnover is important, and you're going to be there for half an hour, you pay for $2. I think that's more sensible. If you're going to be for the long term, you can't park there, and it would be cheaper to park down on this side. So I think in terms of not on a revenue basis, but if revenue is fine, but on a parking management basis, that seems to be a really good decision. Councillor Hooper made the point that might cause confusion. I'm not sure. He may be right. I don't know if it will or not, but I do like the idea, the benefit of the escalating. It gives someone a distinct disincentive to try and sit there for 3 or 4 hours, and that hopefully will help our businesses. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Your microphone, thank you. Turn it off. Thank you. Yes, that was came from the business community last year regarding to the turnover on Esplanade West. So that's why that was initiated. And with the new machines that are coming into place, it looks like there shouldn't be any confusion. I think the confusion I saw was people not understanding how to put their credit card in or how to make the payment. It looks like this new machine would make it much easier for them as well on that score. We're still on number 2. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question again around perhaps an educational component is that I did also receive some concerns that the parking rate was higher on private areas such as the mall and some empty lots. So my question is it up to those private owners to negotiate with Precision ParkLink, or will this kind of be a blanket and also include those private businesses who can negotiate their own rate?
You make references to them all and the other vacant land. They negotiate with the parking company. That's why they put a sign up to say that the revenue from that does not go to the village. There's a sign there as well. So they do their own negotiations.
Good, and as we all know, we're not everybody always reads signs, Your Worship. Thank you.
Yes, you're right there. What, still on the same one, Councillor? Number 2? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, number 2, if you read it, the escalating rate for $2 for the first hour, $3 for the second hour, $4 for the third hour, and $5 for the fourth hour to a maximum of 4 hours. Now, reading that, it means to me, it means $5 for 4 hours. I mean, this has got to actually be set out properly to the members of the public.
No, if you go there, you only want 1 hour. It's $3.
Yeah.
Sorry, $2. You want to go for 2 hours?
Yeah.
It's a $3. You want to go for a third hour? It's $4. And for the fifth, and fifth for the fourth hour to a maximum of
4 hours.
set, which I think it said $14 at the top here. At the second paragraph, $14 total.
$14 for 4 hours.
No, total.
Total.
At the second paragraph on page 2.
I'm even more confused now.
Yeah.
So
in 2020,
for 4 hours, what will the actual cost be? $14 for 4 hours.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it's a total of $14 for 4 hours. And the meter does make that clear. When the person puts in how many hours they want to park, it does the calculation for them.
Right, because...
And the rate is displayed.
Yeah, we've had a lot of confusion in the past on how much people have got to pay. So again, I find that confusing, but I can't see any way around it without changing the whole lot. So no, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on item number 2? No from anybody? I call the question then. All in favour? Opposed anybody? No. Motion passes. Item number 3, that the successful promoter Precise ParkLink be awarded the contract to provide paid parking services as submitted in their proposal dated January 6, 21 for a term of 3 years with an option to extend to additional 2 years. Do we have a move and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Hooper, seconded by Councillor Vidal. Discussion. Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, I noticed last year that their enforcement was very sporadic during the early months. Will they be providing someone there 8 hours every day from the 15th of May? Or are they going to do what they done last year? And it was very sporadic. Sometimes you wouldn't see a parking attendant for days even.
Michelle, do you have any comments from any reports from last year from the company at all?
Our agreement with them is to provide for them to provide enforcement services for 8 hours a day, or up to the amount of time that the paid parking is enforceable. And I don't recall there being days where they were not meeting their obligations. but I know at the beginning of the season, they do ramp up slowly, and there were some staffing issues because of COVID.
Yes, I do recall there was some, like Michelle mentioned, some staffing issue, and they were training a couple of people who became permanent after that. So there was, I believe there was an issue at the beginning. Any further comments from council on number 3? No? Call the question then. All in favour? Nobody opposed? Thank you. Motion passed. And the next order of business, please.
Yes, Your Worship.
We made the... Oh, yes, just a second. I'll just...
A recess for 5 minutes.
Just going to have a 5-minute recess, councillors. We will now reconvene the meeting at 12:20, and the next order of business is...
Yes, Your Worship. This is Councillor Piper brought some late items to the meeting. We'll start with Councillor Piper. Go ahead.
Councillor Piper, you're on.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll start with my request for parking master plan. Due in part to the parking topic in any municipality is always a very passionate one. Therefore, in an effort to build a foundation in planning, I make the following recommendation: that staff provide a report on the development of a parking master plan and implementation strategy for the village as a whole, ensuring to include all residential areas and being mindful public consultation is essential in the processes.
Sorry, is a motion, councillor?
Yes.
And we have a seconder.
Not
Seconded
required.
by Councillor Hooper. Discussion. Councillor Hooper.
It's about time we had a master plan for the village for the parking, because also it would help manage the amount of tourists we have coming into the village. At the moment, a lot of people feel that we're being saturated by the amount of tourists. I mean, over 700,000, I think in 2019, so it's 2020, it was a lot more than that. So, but would we do a master plan? I'd like to see consideration given to actually excluding the tourists and the boating people for actually parking in residential areas to preserve the integrity and the well-being of the residents. Also, if we do a master plan, we need to find somewhere for the boaters to park. It's no good doing a master plan unless we're going to actually form some form of parking for them. I mean, the boaters take up the majority of the areas in Eagle, and they're all parked down the lower, because there's nowhere else for them to park. And bearing in mind that the problems we had this year with, last year with the boaters, they can park their boat and then they drive round for 20 minutes to find somewhere where to park, which means that other people can't launch. And the same when they come back, they have to walk to their cars, probably 10, 15 minutes away. And it's just causing problems. We need some form of area for the boaters to park, which is not going to impact the residents. I mean, it might be that we decide in the end to build a little parking structure to actually take on this. But unless we look at this now, this problem is not going to go away. It's going to get worse in the future. So when we come to look at master parking plan, we need to look at an area which we can possibly purchase, build a small open parking structure that will allow the boaters to use the underneath and tourists the other floors. And given what we're charging for paid parking, it should pay for itself in 5-6 years, and anything after that would be a profit. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do support this this idea, but I want to put it forward that at the height of our tourism season, we also do get a tremendous amount of parking up Rendell area, people parking on Rockwell in order to access Rendell Beach. So I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile to also include District of Kent in some of this strategic plan discussions. Thank you.
That is Rockwell beyond the federal wharf you're referring to?
Yes, yes, Your Worship.
I know they do park this side of Harrison by the Rendell Park. Are you referring to that, or are you referring beyond?
Yeah, beyond, yeah, up Rockwell Drive.
The administrator is going to have a comment on that. Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. I've been taking some notes as Council has spoken of things to include in a draft report with respect to scope. I also note that the parking, these master plans are normally funded by gas tax, which is fully allocated for this year. I would suggest that staff be directed to provide a budget for this to be taken out of paid parking revenue.
If the money is taken out of paid parking revenue, does that then impact the tax bracket? Because that parking revenue, my understanding, does go towards the costs of upkeeping our green spaces.
That's correct, Your Worship. No, I would suggest that we fund this out of surplus parking revenues, which we now would anticipate generating with the May 15th start.
Thank you for that clarification. Other comments from the, yes, Councillor Palmer.
In terms of Councillor Piper's suggestion, it certainly seems, and I would assume this would be included in it, the allocation of disabled parking spots in terms of what's appropriate in the number. Also, in terms of, I know this is already mentioned earlier, but motorcycle spots, parking for bicycles themselves, there should be, that should be part of the overall plan in terms of parking, not just of four-wheeled vehicles, but I think it has to cover all of those things. And I assume that if we do a parking study, it will include the pay parking downtown as well. And of course, that's where issues of disability, et cetera, disabled parking spots can be considered. And then I guess, and I guess riding on Councillor Hooper's thoughts as well, you know, what available spots there may be for additional parking to be created. I don't know that there are a lot, but you know, what areas could we look at creating available parking? And of course, the other issue perhaps is if the overflow parking, whatever we're going to call that property, the overflow parking, the property beside the village hall, should that in fact have some pay cost? Should it be cost? So I just wanted to, Rose, obviously we're looking at making it a broader issue for consultation. The only thing I was going to say is in terms of the issue of parking in residential areas. I mean, there's an awful lot of parking in residential areas. So if we were to make parking in residential areas, that's going to take a lot of parking spots away. I know my house has a car parked in front of it pretty much right through the summer, certainly all through the weekends. And I don't think I'm unique in that. So that's something that has to be looked at rather carefully. Certainly if we were to poll all the people on my street, you probably would have everyone saying we don't want residential parking there, but that would have a pretty negative impact to the businesses in the community as well. So difficult questions, but I think a parking study is a place to have those questions asked. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I think it's a good idea to get this parking study on the table to start discussion. Of course, when we get into the serious discussion, whether it be purchasing land, that's a big impact on a community. Comments were brought up about a parking arcade. That is a big issue because that would only be used maybe 4 months of the year. The rest of the year would be a total loss. Who's going to pay for that? So there'd be a lot of areas that would have to be covered where it could impact the residents in regards to the purchase of land and looking at building parking arcades and all that sort of thing. So it's going to be an interesting discussion, which I think it's a good timing to bring it forward. I just want to ask Councillor, I think we have, maybe I'll ask the staff, do we at the moment looking at one or two areas where we're putting in, now this may not be to do with what the parking strategy regarding no parking signs?
Oh, sorry, Your Worship, are you talking about
have we not, like, I'm just using Pine as a street that's going to have no parking, I believe.
That would certainly be addressed in this review.
Oh, it wouldn't be before that?
I don't anticipate that taking place before
so that's
that.
why I'm asking, is this part of the review, or is it just to do with parking?
No, it's absolutely part of the review. Where is it appropriate to make one side only parking, consideration of residential zones,
okay,
placement, location of handicap parking. I would add to that where we should be planning for future e-charging stations and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're only a footprint of 3 square miles, and it's going to be and we are a resort community, which we all know who live here. We are a resort community, and the boat launch is a big draw for the community, for the use of the lake, and also they do spend money on gas and groceries and that sort of stuff, and so it'll be an interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to it. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Piper, you have any more comments on this, or are you happy with that we're going forward with a budget to get this process moving?
Yeah, I think it's due time that the process gets moving, so we get away from knee-jerk reaction. The municipality as a whole is looked at and dissected, and through the master plan works by traffic experts. Safety will be, I assume, paramount, as it always is in these types of things. So I am looking forward to it getting on the books and moving ahead.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Hooper.
Yes, I'm all for the parking ban, but this could also be discussed within the OPC as well, can't it?
Depends when the OCP is going to start and whether this strategic plan, when is that going to start? Because
I feel that any impact that's going to be held by the residents, they should have a say in this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The discussion? No? Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. Next subject.
Councillor Piper, you wish to speak?
Councillor Piper, please.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about a cover or tent for our outdoor rink. So I would ask for permission through you, Mr. Mayor, to Michelle. As a reminder, have we investigated those types of works to occur? And if we have, can you remind me what the outcome was?
Cheryl?
There has not been any formal investigation into a covering for the rink. However, COVID has brought to light the requirement for more covered outdoor spaces, especially in the off season. And I have done some preliminary investigations into open-ended Quonset type coverings, but haven't received any formal request from council. It's something that maybe could be included into the next iteration of the resort development strategy.
That would be great if staff could make note of that. I've just noticed Tofino in particular has an outdoor facility, and like us, gets a great deal of rain. So during that time of the year, so it may prove to be beneficial. So if staff would kindly add that to their task list, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. And the next item?
My next item is...
hang on, Councillor Hooper has a question, sorry.
Yeah, question is that any coverage for the ice rink would have to be seasonal, otherwise it would affect the boat parking. But at the same time, any coverage for the ice rink would be very expensive at this rate, because you'd have to take into account the wind shear factors that we receive. So this would have to be specially engineered, specially manufactured to go in and come out. So I think the cost of this is going to be astronomical when you consider what we paid for the coverage over the washrooms. Thank you.
Yeah, as I say, when the manager of community services comes back with a report on some costs, then we can discuss that again at that point. Thank you. So Palmer. Microphone, please.
Moving on, trying to move on or expand from Councillor Piper's initial issue of a covering for the rink. I'm just wondering if it's possible for staff to look at other coverings throughout. I've had people ask me, for instance, why maybe a table or two in Spring Park can't be covered for people to get together, particularly with COVID, if they wanted to get together and have a game of cards, or and that would seem to be a reasonable event. I know that in some communities, for instance, in Abbotsford, Mill Lake has several covered areas that are great for small parties. Really helpful in a COVID world, but even in general, very attractive, particularly in a world of either really hot summer day or a really rainy day. So I know that there's cost involved, but those are the sort of things I think would be really helpful for Spring Park and for other parks as well. But I guess I'm more conscious of Spring Park because I live beside it in terms of its usage, and I think that would be helpful. I'm not quite so worried about building shelters along the lake because I think they'd fill up quickly with tourists, and it just would be one place that would be filled up at 7 o'clock in the morning. But in Spring Park or someplace where it would be resident purposes, I would be quite eager to see some covering. So just well, if we're looking for some investigations, that's an investigation I'd like to see in terms of some costs and possibilities. Thank you.
The pen has been going behind you, writing everything down, Councillor.
As long as it's not being tossed.
your microphone, please. Thank you. And the next item, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next topic I had was bus shelters. So I do appreciate learning that Council will have a report in front of them in February. And additionally, pleased to learn that Mccoombs may be one of the locations identified for a bus shelter. I'm hoping that it is anticipated to be located near the age-restricted complex. And not to repeat myself, but providing shelters contribute positively to ridership and adds dignity for riders as they await their pickup in inclement weather or hot weather conditions. So looking forward to that report.
Thank you, Councillor. Was there anything else?
Yeah, I have one more.
Councillor Hooper, you had a comment on that?
Yeah, on any additional bus shelters, I'd like to see them more enclosed than what they are, because people are standing out at these shelters and they're open to all the elements. Now, there are designs where they can be enclosed, where you have an in and out and the rest of it of these shelters, and they're fully illuminated as well. We can't expect people in driving rain and that to stay in there getting wet all the time. So I'd like to see any shelters that are now be put in place, purchased now, have some more form of protection for the people that are standing there from the elements. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Schell. Was there any specific areas identified in the active transportation plan for additional bus shelters?
No, I don't believe it was identified in the active transportation plan. What BC Transit does is they identify the need based on ridership, and the type of shelters that are recommended to us from BC Transit are between 20 and 50 riders per day.
Thank you. It's just also referring back to the last discussion on parking. I think the more bus shelters and bus transportation that we have available may encourage people to come by bus rather than bringing their vehicles down, and perhaps also with some of our residents who just want to go down for a brief period of time would find using public transportation another alternative for them. So I'm also looking forward to the report, but I do think we're moving in the right direction. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor, any more comments? Councillor Piper, you have anything to finish off with?
No, I've said all I need to say.
Good, thank you very much. Is the business for today?
Councillor Piper, did you have any other items?
Pardon?
I did initially have, sorry, staff, I did have one initial or a fourth topic, sorry, when I rattled out my list, but on second blush, I think I'll ask to strike that from the agenda, and I will approach those topics in a different way. So thank you.
You, Councillor.
Thank you.
At the end of the business
Correct.
for today? By Councillor Palmer. All in favour? Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Councillor Piper, being at home, nice and warm.